Good morning. Socrates' defense or apology. I do not know what effect my accusers have had upon you, gentlemen, but for my own part I was almost carried away by them. Their arguments were so convincing. On the other hand, scarcely a word of what they said was true. I was especially astonished at one of their many misrepresentations. I mean, when they told you that you must be careful not to let me deceive you, the implication being that I am a skillful speaker. I thought that it was peculiarly brazen of them to tell you this without a blush, since they must know that they will soon be effectively confuted, when it becomes obvious that I have not the slightest skill as a speaker, unless, of course, by a skillful speaker they mean one who speaks the truth. If that is what they mean, I would agree that I am an orator, though not after their pattern. My accusers, then, as I maintain, have said little or nothing that is true, but from me you shall hear the whole truth. Not, I can assure you, gentlemen and ladies, in flowery language like theirs, decked out with fine words and phrases. No, what you will hear will be a straightforward speech in the first words that occur to me, confident as I am in the justice of my cause. And I do not want any of you to expect anything different. It would hardly be suitable, gentlemen, for a man of my age to address you in the artificial language of a schoolboy orator. One thing, however, I do most earnestly beg and entreat of you. If you hear me defending myself in the same language which it has been my habit to use, both in the open spaces of the city, where many of you have heard me, and elsewhere, do not be surprised and do not interrupt. Let me remind you of my position. This is my first appearance in a court of law at the age of 70, and so I am a complete stranger to the language of this place. Now, if I were really from another country, you would naturally excuse me if I spoke in a manner and a dialect in which I had been brought up. And so in the present case, I make this request of you, which I think is only reasonable, to disregard the manner of my speech. It may be better or it may be worse, and to consider and concentrate your attention upon this one question, whether my claims are fair or not. That is the first duty of the juryman, just as it is the pleader's duty to speak the truth. The proper course for me, gentlemen of the jury, is to deal first with the earliest charges that have been falsely brought against me, and with my earliest accusers, and then with the later ones. I make this distinction because I have already been accused in your hearing by a great many people for a great many years, though without a word of truth, and I am more afraid of those people than I am of Anytus and his colleagues, although they are formidable enough. But the others are still more formidable. I mean the people who took hold of so many of you when you were children and tried to fill your minds with untrue accusations against me, saying, "There is a wise man called Socrates, who has theories about the heavens and has investigated everything below the earth, and can make the weaker argument defeat the stronger." It is these people, gentlemen, the disseminators of these rumors, who are my dangerous accusers, because those who hear them suppose that anyone who inquires into such matters must be an atheist. Besides, there are a great many of these accusers, and they have been accusing me now for a great many years. And what is more, they approach you at the most impressionable age, when some of you were children or adolescent, and they literally won their case by default, because there was no one to defend me. And the most fantastic thing of all is that it is impossible for me even to know and tell you their names, unless one of them happens to be a playwright. All these people who have tried to set you against me out of envy and love of slander, and some too merely passing on what they have been told by others. All these are very difficult to deal with. It is impossible to bring them here for a cross-examination. One simply has to conduct one's defense and argue one's case against an invisible opponent, because there is no one to answer. So I ask you to accept my statement that my critics fall into two classes. On the one hand, my immediate accusers, and on the other, those earlier ones whom I have mentioned. And you must suppose that I have first to defend myself against the latter. After all, you heard them abusing me longer ago and much more violently than these more recent accusers. Very well, then. I must begin my defense, gentlemen, and I must try in the short time that I have to rid your minds of a false impression, which is the work of many years. I should like this to be the result, gentlemen, assuming it to be for your advantage and my own. And I should like to be successful in my defense. But I think that it will be difficult, and I am quite aware of the nature of my task. However, let that turn out as God wills. I must obey the law and make my defense. Let us go back to the beginning and consider what the charge is that has made me so unpopular and has encouraged Meletus to draw up this indictment. Very well. What did my critics say in attacking my character? I must read out their affidavit, so to speak, as though they were my legal accusers. Socrates is guilty of criminal meddling, in that he inquires into things below the earth and in the sky, and makes the weaker argument defeat the stronger, and teaches others to follow his example. It runs something like that. You have seen it for yourselves in the play by Aristophanes, where Socrates goes whirling round, proclaiming that he is walking on air, and uttering a great deal of other nonsense about things of which I know nothing whatsoever. I mean no disrespect for such knowledge. If anyone really is versed in it, I do not want any more lawsuits brought against me by Meletus. But the fact is, gentlemen, that I take no interest in it. What is more, I call upon the greater part of you as witnesses to my statement, and I appeal to all of you who have ever listened to me talking, and there are a great many to whom this applies, to clear your neighbors' minds on this point. Tell one another whether any one of you has ever heard me discuss such questions briefly or at length, and then you will realize that the other popular reports about me are equally unreliable. The fact is that there is nothing in any of these charges, and if you have heard anyone say that I try to educate people and charge a fee, there is no truth in that either. I wish there were, because I think that It is a fine thing if a man is qualified to teach, as in the case of Gorgias of Leonte and Prodicus of Chios and Hippias of Elis. Each one of these is perfectly capable of going into any city and actually persuading the young men to leave the company of their fellow citizens, with any of whom they can associate for nothing, and attach themselves to him and pay money for the privilege, and be grateful into the bargain. There is another expert too from Paros, who I discovered was here on a visit. I happened to meet a man who was paid more in sophist fees than all the rest put together. I mean Callias, the son of Hipponicus. So I asked him. He has 2 sons, you see, Callias. I said, if your sons had been colts or calves, we should have had no difficulty in finding and engaging a trainer to perfect their natural qualities. And this trainer would have been some sort of horse dealer or agriculturist. But seeing that they are human beings, whom do you intend to get as their instructor? Who is the expert in perfecting the human and social qualities? I assume from the fact of your having sons that you must have considered the question, is there such a person or not? Certainly, said he. Who is he, and where does he come from? Said I. And what does he charge? Even as of Paro, Socrates, said he, and his fee is 5 minas. I felt that Evenus was to be congratulated if he really was a master of his art and taught it at such a moderate fee. I should certainly plume myself and give myself airs if I understood these things. But in fact, gentlemen, I do not. Here perhaps one of you might interrupt me and say, but what is that you do, Socrates? How is it that you have been misrepresented like this? Surely all this talk and gossip about you would never have arisen if you had confined yourself to ordinary activities, but only if your behavior was abnormal. Tell us the explanation, if you do not want us to invent it for ourselves. This seems to me to be a reasonable request, and I will try to explain to you what it is that has given me this false notoriety. So please give me your attention. Perhaps some of you will think that I am not being serious, but I assure you that I am going to tell you the whole truth. I have gained this reputation, gentlemen, from nothing more or less than a kind of wisdom. What kind of wisdom do I mean? Human wisdom, I suppose. It seems that I really am wise in this limited sense. Presumably the geniuses whom I mentioned just now are wise in a wisdom that is more than human. I do not know how else to account for it. I certainly have no knowledge of such wisdom, and anyone who says that I have is a liar and willful slanderer. Now, gentlemen, please do not interrupt me if I seem to make an extravagant claim, for what I am going to tell you is not my own opinion. I am going to refer you to an unimpeachable authority. I shall call as witness to my wisdom, such as it is, the god at Delphi. I think we'll stop there for today. Have a lovely day.